Okay, let's dive in. We're looking at a really compelling question today, stemming from the material you've brought forward.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one.
Basically, why would ideas from, what, a century ago? Ideas that science, well, largely dismissed back then, why do they suddenly feel relevant, potent, even now?
It really does make you pause, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the focus here is the work of Walter Russell. He was an artist, a mystic.
Right.
And back 1921, he had this experience, this profound cosmic illumination, as he called it.
And out of that came this, well, this vision of the universe, not built on solid stuff, but on rhythm, light, consciousness.
Exactly.
What's striking about the text we're exploring is how it maps this out. It shows his vision, then slams it against the science of his day,
Stark contrast.
and then reveals these, surprising connections to modern science and philosophy.
That's the core of it.
Yeah.
So our mission for this deep dive is really to unpack all that.
Hmm.
We need to get a handle on Russell's concepts as presented here.
Understand why they were maybe put on the shelf for so long.
And really dig into why this material argues they matter uniquely now, with all the scientific shifts and global stuff we're facing.
I have to say, I'm genuinely excited to get into this. It feels a bit like finding puzzle pieces that just didn't fit the old box, but might be key for a new one.
That's a great way to put it.
And that central question from the sources, why speak of Walter Russell now? That's really our guide here, isn't it?
Absolutely. So let's start by setting the scene. What was Russell's vision coming out of that 1921 experience? And just how different was it from the science of the time?
Okay, so drawing from the material, Russell saw a universe basically born from thought, from consciousness itself.
Wow. Okay.
He talked about glimpsing the universal one, this cosmic rhythm. For him, reality wasn't about solid particles, not at all. It was all light and energy
Wait,
in constant rhythmic motion. And consciousness wasn't just a side effect of the universe. It was the source, the bedrock.
the ground of being, as the source puts it.
Yeah, and everything governed by balanced polarity, like a cosmic inhale and exhale.
Okay, now let's picture the scientific world in 1921. It was a vastly different place.
Very different.
The dominant view. Overwhelmingly materialist, mechanistic. Think like a giant clockwork machine for the universe.
A machine made of tiny, hard bits of stuff. The atom, for example, mostly imagined as this little solid, indivisible ball, right?
Pretty much. And space. Just emptiness. A void for these little bits to move around in.
Yeah, just nothing.
And consciousness. Well, that was seen mostly as, a complex outcome of the physical brain, something that just emerged from all the complex wiring.
Like software running on the brain's hardware.
Kind of. Localized, purely biological. Definitely not fundamental to reality itself.
The text also mentions how Western science back then looked at Eastern philosophies. Things like Vedanta's Maya, the idea that physical form is a kind of illusion, or Buddhism's Sunyata, emptiness, or Taoism's Tao and yin-yang, that fundamental principle and the balance of opposites.
Right. They were often seen as, well, interesting, maybe. Mystical, philosophical, but not really related to the real physical world that science dealt with.
Not something you could measure or quantify easily.
Exactly. And that context is crucial for understanding Russell's reception. His vision, as the material says, was utterly alien to that whole way of thinking.
Because he's talking about thought creating reality.
Right.
Consciousness being primary, matter just being conditioned, light and energy moving in rhythms, space being full of potential, not empty.
It just didn't compute within that framework. He was, to borrow that phrase again from the text, speaking a language the world wasn't yet equipped or perhaps willing to hear.
So his ideas just didn't fit. They didn't mesh with the scientific dogma of the day.
Leading to, polite dismissal or just being ignored by the establishment. It actually makes sense from that 1921 perspective.
And here's the turn. The material argues that the scientific picture itself has started to shift. A lot. Since then.
Dramatically. And that shift, the argument goes, is precisely why Russell's ideas are popping up again now.
Okay, so where are these shifts? Let's unpack that.
Well, look at quantum physics, for starters. As we've peered deeper, that idea of solid little particles is kind of dissolved.
Yeah, it's much weirder now.
We're talking waves, fields, probabilities, interconnectedness. The fundamental level feels less like billiard balls and more like, well, shimmering energy fields, conditioned energy maybe.
And the observer effect, that strange role consciousness seems to play in how reality manifests at that level. Hints of something deeper connecting things.
Exactly. Then jump to the other end of the scale. Cosmology. studying the whole universe.
Right.
We're wrestling with dark matter, dark energy, these huge unseen energies shaping everything.
Yeah.
And there's more talk now about vast cyclical processes in the cosmos.
Cycles again. Echoes of Russell's cosmic rhythm idea.
And then there's neuroscience. The material points to the hard problem of consciousness.
Ah, yes, the big mystery. Why do we have subjective experience? Why does it feel like something to be alive?
It's not just how the brain works, but why there's an inner world at all. And that puzzle is making some scientists question if consciousness is just an emergent property.
Or maybe something more fundamental.
Potentially. Plus, you have fields like complex systems, nonlinear dynamics.
Huh.
They show a universe that's way more dynamic, interconnected, less predictable than that old clockwork model. Everything affecting everything else.
So all these changes, these cracks in the old materialist edifice, as the source puts it, they create a different kind of environment.
Fertile ground, exactly,
Yeah.
for ideas that might have sounded completely off the wall a century ago.
And the material draws some direct lines here.
Yeah, like Russell's fundamentally mental universe, with consciousness primary. Finding resonance in that hard problem in neuroscience.
Okay.
Or his matter as conditioned energy, sounding, well, surprisingly similar to the language of quantum fields.
That connection seems quite strong.
And his focus on universal rhythmic cycles and balanced polarity, relating maybe to cosmic patterns, forces in nature, maybe even, as the text suggests, the known power of mind over body, things like placebo effects, psychosomatic connections.
The power of thought on form.
Right. So this is the argument for why Russell now. The idea is that maybe, just maybe, our collective understanding, scientific, philosophical, is finally beginning to be ready to hear the cosmic song he heard.
His insights suddenly feel like they could be pieces of a bigger puzzle, a more unified picture that's starting to emerge.
A puzzle that maybe bridges the physical and the metaphysical.
Okay, but the text you shared is also really careful here. It stresses the need for, intellectual honesty.
Absolutely crucial.
As compelling as these connections might feel, we need to be clear about what Russell's work actually was and what it wasn't.
Yes. The material is explicit. Russell's work, however profound his insights, was not presented as empirical science in the modern sense.
And what does that mean, practically speaking?
It means it wasn't based on the usual scientific method. No controlled, repeatable experiments.
Right.
No reliance on empirical data gathered through precise measurement. He didn't lay out mathematical derivations making testable predictions. It wasn't peer-reviewed in scientific journals.
Well, where did it come from?
Intuitive perception, philosophical reasoning, often expressed through his art, his diagrams.
So the text fully acknowledges that from a standard scientific viewpoint, his work has valid limitations and criticisms. It just doesn't slot neatly into that established framework.
Correct. And it asks the question directly, was Russell a scientist, as we define one today, using that method? And the answer given is pretty clear. No, not in that sense.
Okay. But then the follow-up is key. Does that mean his work is irrelevant now?
And the answer there is just as clear, absolutely not.
So what is its relevance then, if not as science?
This is where the materials suggest his most valuable role might lie, especially now, in this time of shifting paradigms. It proposes he could be a kind of potential bridge builder.
A bridge?
Yeah.
Between what areas?
Between domains we usually keep separate. Science, spirituality, philosophy. Because his vision came from sensing this underlying unity, it naturally connects these fields.
Interesting. It's like he speaks a language that touches on the mystic's direct knowing, the philosopher's contemplation, and maybe even echoes the physicist's search for fundamental laws.
Even the methods of the vocabulary are different.
Yes. The text says his work invites a dialogue between these fields, suggesting they're not opposed, but maybe just different windows looking onto the same reality.
Right, different perspective.
And that perspective kind of challenges everyone, doesn't it? It pushes science to look beyond purely material explanations, especially for tricky things like consciousness.
True.
It maybe pushes spirituality to ground itself in universal principles, not just belief, and philosophy.
Well, to integrate intuition and direct experience with reason and observation.
It's a call for a more holistic view, really. Looking ahead, the material hints at a future where maybe those lines do blur more, where ancient insights find echoes in modern discoveries. A future where maybe that cosmic song Russell heard becomes clearer for more of us.
His vision is framed as this powerful reminder, a reminder that the universe might be unified, alive, conscious, rhythmic.
And a reminder about our own human potential, that capacity maybe to perceive things beyond our normal senses, beyond the standard models.
Yeah. You shared that quote from Zoran in the text, the metaphor about Russell being like a seed.
Yes. A seed holds the blueprint of the tree. Russell is a seed of cosmic knowing, planted in a time of barren soil, waiting for the season of your understanding to be ready.
It's a powerful image, waiting for the right conditions.
And then finally, the material leaves you, the listener, with this prompt. They call it the Dragon Trial, chapter 26.
Yes, it's a direct challenge.
It asks you to look at the world today, environmental crises, social divisions, that personal search for meaning we all feel
The
sometimes.
big stuff.
And then to consider, what if you shifted your view towards a more unified, interconnected, rhythmic, conscious understanding of the universe, the kind Russell pointed towards, the kind echoed in some of these newer scientific ideas?
How might that change things?
How might seeing yourself and the world not as separate myths in a void, but as part of a living, conscious, interwoven system, how might that change your approach to the problems you see, personally and globally?
It's a deep question to sit with.
So, quite a journey we've taken, from Russell's vision and its clash with 1921's science,
Through the shifts in modern science, making his ideas resonate today,
acknowledging the methodological critiques.
and landing on his potential role as this bridge builder.
I think the core takeaway from the material is pretty clear. While Russell's work isn't empirical science by today's definition, it offers this really potent conceptual framework.
A framework that seems to connect deeply with some of the biggest questions science and philosophy are grappling with right now, about reality, about consciousness.
Yeah, inviting us to consider a universe that's maybe far more unified, more conscious than the old machine model ever allowed.
And we end with that image,
Yeah.
Russell as the seed, planted way back then. Maybe, just maybe, the soil of our collective understanding is finally getting fertile enough now.
Enough for those ideas to sprout, to contribute something new.
So that final question lingers. Ponder that dragon trial prompt. How does that shift in perspective feel to you? How might it change how you view the world, your own life within that cosmic rhythm?
Are we collectively finally ready to hear that song?